You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm your host, Niki Sims. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Barbell Logic Online Coaching, and I'm a coach and even a nutrition coach, which is really important today because I am joined by Brittany Snyder. Brittany Snyder is a professional barbell coach. She's a nutrition coach, and she is our Director of Nutrition at Barbell Logic Online Coaching. Hi, Brittany.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Niki. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Brittany's a really, really cool person. She not only helps people with nutrition and strength, but in her the rest of her life, she is a fire captain. She's been working in that field for 17 years, and she lives in beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yes, ma'am. You can see the sun coming onto through my windows.
Much
yes.
Delicious sun there.
Yes, there is.
And I had to steal one of your notes from your bio. I went to our website and I read your bio, and it was hilarious. So I'm going to share this with you. I think it sums it up really well. Do you remember this? So Brittany Snyder, combine the warm welcome of a campfire, the organizational skills of the cartel, and the spice of a New Mexico chili pepper, and you'll arrive at Brittany Snyder. I think that sums it up pretty well.
Why, thank you. Why, thank you.
So we have Brittany on today because as our nutrition director, she's in a position where she really influences how we deliver our product, what we help our coaches be able to navigate, how we, manage the whole relationship between the client and the coach. And it takes someone who has really been through some stuff to start teaching clients and then start teaching other coaches. And we've said this before, but sometimes the best coaches are those who have had to really overcome a lot. So
yeah,
really
certainly.
Excited to hear, your personal journey and what that's been like for you and how you arrived at this position where you are now.
Yeah. I'm excited to share it.
Yeah. How did things... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe at the beginning, if you want me to sort of share my nutrition through the different stages of life. If you think that's a good place to start.
Yes. Yeah. Start from the beginning. We've all had our ups and downs, and thinking back to teenage years.
Yeah. So nutrition is not something that was ever effortless for me. I've always been a very motivated person. And even back when I was a young kid, like in my elementary school years, I was a pretty heavy set kid. And like I said, very food motivated. It was, I'm not going to say the center of my life, but it had a big weight in terms of what I cared about and my priorities. And so, I sort of grew up just a huskier kid. And I think by 8th grade, I have this memory of stepping on the scale and being about 177 pounds by 8th grade. And so then into my teen years, I became a little bit more active. I found sports like cheerleading in high school and PE, physical education. And those things definitely had a strong influence, in terms of athleticism, but my nutrition was still really poor. And I think thinking back, my daily lunch routine in high school, we'd go to the Tiger Tub, that was a little school lunch shop that we had on campus. And I would get those fake nachos, the kind that you get at the gas station with the fake cheese. Yeah. So it was nachos, a breadstick, and a Diet Coke.
Oh my God.
And that was my lunch for probably all of my junior and senior year. And I was just clueless. I didn't understand what sort of macronutrients and micronutrients I needed in order to perform well. It was just sort of lost on me. And your weekend habits at that age revolve around socializing and getting together with your friends. And you're not thinking about prepping meals or getting to the grocery store. You're not even involved in that stuff generally at that age, right? So
true.
By the time I was a young adult, I definitely had some issues around food, nutrition. I started to become really frustrated because I started to, become heavier once again, much like I was in my younger days. In high school, I kind of got away with some stuff because I was exercising so much. But then by 19 and 20, I was really frustrated. And at 19 years old, I had this narrative in my head that I knew what to do and I was doing all the things, but the weight just was stubborn and it wasn't coming off and it must be my genetics. And I had this narrative that the only option was surgery. And so at
Okay.
19 years old, I saved up all my money and I went and got abdominal liposuction thinking that
Oh,
was the
wow.
answer. This is my free pass. Finally going to lose the weight and get rid of the extra, tire around my midsection. And in reality, right, thinking back, I wasn't doing all the things. I wasn't really doing any of the things that would lend to a healthy nutrition practice. I felt really frustrated and had that idea that I think there's this difference. And I think maybe we can dive into this again, maybe on a different day, about the difference between knowing what you're supposed to do, but actually doing it.
Yeah.
And sometimes those things get muddy, right? You think like, I know all there is to know, and it's still not coming off. And so like I said, at 19 years old, decided to have abdominal liposuction, which would end up being a very temporary and fleeting result. I would say realistically, probably 1 or 2 years, but within 1 or 2 years, things were kind of back to where they were because I hadn't made any lifestyle changes. I was still
That must have been so
19.
frustrating.
It was a big lesson learned, right? It was a very expensive lesson. Is essentially what it was. And it's a little bit vulnerable to talk about it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a little bit, you never know what sort of judgment people are going to cast when you talk about surgeries, elective surgeries and things. But it was a really important lesson for me to learn that there just wasn't that shortcut. It doesn't exist. And I still had to do the things that change the habits, the things I'd been ignoring for years if I was going to actually make progress. Around
Yeah.
this time, when I was about 20 years old, I entered the fire service and I entered as a cadet. Again, at this point, I was back to being rather heavy set, and still didn't really have a good grasp on how to help my nutrition along in order to support my performance, even in the fire academy. And that's a very brutal, very demanding period of time. And I still just didn't quite have it together yet. And so while I got through it okay, I think, and even the fire service itself can really develop some very unique challenges around nutrition. But either way, it wasn't until, sort of getting into my late 20s where I started to appreciate the importance of nutrition and how it plays a role in our well-being, our performance, how we feel, how we sleep, those sorts of things. And, throughout my 20s, try to find the right diet, right? I feel like that's what a lot
Yeah.
of us are doing in our 20s, even our 30s, our 40s. We think that we just need to find the right diet and things will just unlock for us, or we will suddenly feel motivated. So I spent so much time in my 20s reading all the books, all the magazines, reading anything that women's health had to suggest. If there was a book on anything nutrition related, I was reading it. Through my CrossFit days, I was trying paleo. Then it was about zone, and I tried keto, and reading books on plant-based, but not too much plants because those have lectins, and eat right for your blood type, and eliminate sugar. And there's so many directions people can get sent in, right? And I just spent my 20s in this hamster wheel of
Yeah.
thinking I just needed to find the right thing, and I just hadn't unlocked the right thing yet, the right diet, something that was new and exciting. And in reality, the truth is I had been trying to knowledge my way towards better health. If I just read more about it and I get really interested in it, somehow I'll find motivation and I will just gain traction and get to where I need to be. And the truth is it didn't really play out that way, right? I couldn't read my way or, Google search my way really
Yeah.
into anything that was lending to results.
And I want to, if I can, go back to something that you said at the very beginning. You said you're really food motivated. What is that like? Is it like taste motivated? Is it emotionally driven?
Yeah. I think it's a big source of pleasure and interest for me. And I think even as a kid, it was something I really looked forward to. I look forward to going to the movies because the popcorn was going to be there.
Yeah.
Or I look forward to going camping because I know we're going to make bacon and eggs, which is something really special that we only do when we go camping. And so to me, the food experiences became highlights for me. And I think there's a big piece of nutrition that is psychological, right?
Yeah.
We've got these psychological components and these memories and these associations. And for me, I just had so many food related associations that I don't think I ever really grew out of. It started as a kid, but I think they're still there.
Yeah.
You know, going out to dinner with a date, going out to, things like that. They still, the food part is still such a part of our culture. And we have those associations that are pretty strong, pretty deeply rooted, I think.
Totally. And I've noticed that too, where when you're growing up, I think a lot of the times you're told no a lot. Like, no, you can't do this. Like you're growing up, your parents being at school, they're trying to hold you within these certain boundaries. And then when you're eating and you have these special occasion meals, you like finally get a chance to be like, cool, this feels
Yeah.
good. I want more of this.
Yeah.
And then when you, especially, seeing this a lot more with like younger girls in my life, like they start to see their bodies change and all of a sudden they're so uncomfortable, and yet they have like their kind of child way of eating, and then they have their body that's becoming it's growing up and it's
Yes.
changing, and it's so hard for those two kind of pathways to connect and see how they influence each other and like tear away the emotion and habits that have been created for years, like 19 years, 17 years, a long time.
And I think that's key, what you just said about we've got habits that have been lingering for decades. And while oftentimes we will apply ourselves to this new diet that we found, and there's that temporary dopamine release and that temporary excitement of a new diet, whether it's a meal plan or it's something with restrictions, or I'm going to eliminate all of this and I'm going to only eat this. In a way, it can be a useful tool. But what really has to happen is we've got to chip away at those habits that we've created, sometimes over decades. And that cannot be ignored. When I first started working with my predecessor, Jillian Ward, she was previously the director of nutrition. And this is a couple years back. She brought me on. She knew I was interested in learning more about nutrition coaching, becoming a nutrition coach myself. And she left a really strong impression the very first time we ever did our call. We did our very first, Zoom call to get things started. And I was really, one of the things I walked away taking notice was how much of it was her listening and me being able to sort of just come out with what my struggles were and just being able to freely talk, right? Versus the coach who knows all the things dominating the conversation. She really just sat and listened, and she sort of let me explore and reflect on where is it that your nutrition is falling apart, or where is it that you feel like you're struggling? Like, don't overthink it. She really is. And it was such an impactful moment for me where it was, let's reflect. What area of your nutrition do you feel is a little bit slippery right now?
Wow.
And I knew immediately the answer.
Oh, really? And I want to know what that is. But real quick, I noticed like when you were searching, when you were doing your like knowledge binging, it was like searching for answers and looking through all these external sources to tell you what to do. And then liposuction, another external source of like, this is my answer. This is going to give me what I need. And then it sounds like Jillian taught you how to bring it out of yourself. So it started to become an internal answer.
Yeah, it's a really good observation. Yeah, it was. It wasn't about bombarding you with science or you need to fit your life into these macros. It was, what's going on in here? Like what's going on up here? Where do you feel like your nutrition is consistently, where are you struggling in your nutrition? And I knew immediately where it was.
What did you find?
Everybody's got different answers, but the first thing I knew that needed to be tackled was my after dinner snacking. I think after dinner is done, I need something to look forward to in the evenings. I don't want to know that the kitchen is closed. I need something else, to accompany that happy family time or that TV time. Or part of it was just, I was seeking pleasure in food and looking for something that signaled the end of the day. And, and I did a real assessment, and I did a visual food diary with her for a couple of days, right? We logged everything I was eating for a couple of days. So we had a little bit of data to back this up. But when I sat down and thought about it, I was probably taking in a good 800 calories consistently after dinner most nights. You sort of wandered into the kitchen and you sort of got yourself some chips, and then you got something else a little crunchy and something else a little salty, and let's have a couple glasses of wine. And man,
a delicious adventure where you get to have fun.
Yes. And when I actually got real about it, I was like, oh, No amount of articles or diets or restrictions or rules are changing the fact that I am still sneaking into the kitchen, sometimes in hiding, sometimes hiding it
Yeah.
because I'm embarrassed,
Same.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first thing that needed to be tackled. And so our approach was very simple. It was, okay, if you think that 800 calories is generally what you're doing for the next couple weeks, why don't we just put a boundary at about 500 for the night? I'm not saying you got to stop snacking and the kitchen's closed. It was not this firm, hard thing. But one of the first things we did was just find something that I felt comfortable and ready to change. And that was just the beginning. I mean, to me, it was just a different chapter. And it launched me into something that was starting to create, if we fast forward years ahead now, it was the beginning of creating lasting change for me and really tackling things that could no longer be ignored if I seriously wanted to get results and live at a healthier body weight. So yeah, it started with that. And then as I became more comfortable with that, and I was like, hey, 500 is pretty doable. What if we made it 400?
Oh, wow.
And
but
it
you
really
instigated
put me,
that.
yeah, I felt
cool.
like, and I think this is really important in nutrition, it was much more collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt buy-in, and I at no time felt judged or threatened. We weren't going to do anything that I didn't feel ready and willing to tackle or ready and willing to look at. And I think that that's something I've definitely taken. We can talk more about my approach as a coach later on if you like, but that is definitely something that I adopted into my own practice, is that nutrition is so sensitive. And you have to be mindful that you have to be careful not to cast judgment or make people feel judged for where they are today.
Yeah.
And there's an art to that, right? And that's one of the things I really took away in working and learning from Jillian was just that art of keeping things positive and making people feel supported and still like they're in the driver's seat. You're just the navigator. Hey, I'm noticing that you really want to tackle these things. These are the places. I'm happy to help steer us there.
Yeah. And that evening, nighttime kind of ritual, there's something important to you that is happening there. And so it wasn't like the answer that you guys came up with to just completely take it away. And I think that's that can be something that people do when they're just like sick of how they're feeling. They're just like, I know it's this, I'm going to throw it away. And then that's where you get kind of like the bounce back effect, because there's something there that brings you joy. And, you know, like respecting that is important, or else you're going to find it in another way or sneak it back in and not give yourself the chance to move gradually. Like it sounds what you did.
Yeah. And, you know, something I've observed in my own coaching practice now after a couple of years and working with hundreds of clients at this point is that all or nothing generally leads to nothing.
Ooh.
And so when we come out too hot and we say, I'm cutting out this and I'm doing, and, you know, and I did the same thing in my 20s when, like, for example, I adopted a really strict paleo diet and it was very effective. But I found that I came out of the gate really hot. I took really strict rules and it wasn't sustainable for me long-term. And I didn't have permanent, you know, I didn't maintain my healthy weight permanently at all. So yeah, I think it's really important to find things that are gradual and that don't create a sense of resistance as well. You know, that feeling when somebody you start tracking down something, a certain path, or somebody makes a suggestion and it creates that internal resistance that like, oh, I don't know. Oh.
I know, because I like just did it to myself like 2 weeks ago. And then I was so annoyed at myself.
Yeah. And I like to say like 10% white knuckling is okay. Like, okay, I'm going to get a little uncomfortable. This is going to be a little bit hard, but I don't want it to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not so sure about this. I feel really uncomfortable and I'm just going to have to fake my way through it or pretend like I'm nailing it. None of that. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of our approach in general when it, you know, and I know we'll talk more about the block approach, but I think that's a big part, right? Is finding something that people are sure they can do with 90% consistency with just a little bit of discomfort. That it doesn't feel like,
because when you create like a state of scarcity, that's when stuff's going to happen. That's when you go into the all or nothing zone.
Oh my. Yeah. Scarcity definitely breeds anxiety, right? And we're not going to be able to make permanent positive change when we're coming from a place of anxiety or scarcity. Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it like after you made that initial change?
Yeah, it really snowballed. So it started with that. And we would just every month have a call and sort of just reflect on what areas are feeling challenging and what areas are going well. And so we spent at least a month or two focusing on after dinner snacking. And what, that's sort of the overall goal, but a lot of really cool micro habits happen behind that, right? You start looking at, well, how can I fit satisfaction volume and still get the same pleasure with less caloric foods?
Yeah.
What are some swaps I can make? Maybe instead of chips, it becomes more of a lighter popcorn, something that's 35 calories a cup instead of 150 calories in a, little tiny bowl. So we started looking at those things. And, even just sort of being more mindful about the number of alcoholic drinks per night.
Yeah.
And we started to roll that then into, hey, let's have a budget for drinks for the week. And again, it felt like I was in the driver's seat. We said, hey, why don't we just say if you're generally drinking 10, let's try to make it 7 for the week. And you can place those things where you want. And it just sort of made me feel like I had a budget. We talk about this a lot in terms of nutrition being a lot like a budget. And that's what it felt like. Hey, you've got this much to play with, but you're in control of when and, which levers to pull. And that way it didn't feel super restrictive. And so these became habits that I have now been carrying on for years. I'm very mindful about my after dinner intake, and I've created smarter swaps. I'm incorporating a lot more fruit than I ever was before. And again, that lighter popcorn, I think, is a huge slam dunk. Those kind of things. And we continue to do a visual food diary because I found that to be really helpful. Not everybody likes it, right? Not everybody likes taking a photo of their food and uploading it for someone to see. I personally really enjoy it. And I like having somebody else on the other side of those decisions too. That accountability piece was huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those were some of the things that we sort of took off with. And it's now been 2 years. And I am now sitting 10 pounds lighter. Like I live 10 pounds lighter, which 10 pounds doesn't sound like a huge
That's
amount to people. But for
significant.
me, it is significant. It's
Yeah.
significant in how I feel, in my confidence, in how my clothes fit, in how I carry myself. I've got the same, as you mentioned before, I've been in the fire service for 18 years now, and I've got this belt, and I have worn this same belt for my entire career. I've had this same belt since I was a cadet.
That's
And I've
amazing.
watched the belt notches over my career. And there's
Chill.
times when that belt notch was way, it was way out there. And I'm on the smallest right now. And it's
Wow.
just sort of this time capsule of progress. And it's really exciting to sort of have this new place that's normal for me. So yeah,
So
it's
what does normal feel like? Normal before you made a note before the call that you were just consumed by, is this wrong? Am I too heavy? I don't look good. It's time to get liposuction. And now that
Yeah.
seems like it's totally
Yep.
different. What does it feel like
I
now?
feel like my size, and I wasn't, I mean, just to paint a picture, I wasn't, obese by any standard,
No.
but
No.
it still was heavier than I wanted to be. And it created this frustration on a daily basis when I'd put my clothes on and you turn all the angles and you're like, oh, does my gut hang out funny, or can I
Yeah.
change this? And you go through 4 or 5 outfits before you find one, and everything was centered around everything looking flattering. Flattering,
Totally.
flattering, flattering. I've got to wear black. I can't wear this. I can't show this. Nope. If I bend that way, my belly shows. And
Yeah.
I feel like I tortured myself, probably unnecessarily, to be fair. But I was just consumed by just feeling overweight and not feeling like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing and not feeling like I was the best version of myself. One of the bigger things I think that I've noticed a difference in is the shame component, or the anxiety or the guilt component.
Yeah.
So I think that is where some of the biggest strides have been made. So not only have I moved away from this narrative and this sort of, and I wouldn't do it out loud, right? But this sort of negative self-talk that I was kind of badgering myself with. Even before the weight started to come off, my attitude and my approach started to change. And I started to look at my food decisions as data instead of reflections of my discipline or how well I was doing. It started to become almost, it is huge. It truly is. Even looking now, when I do have a misstep or something that's not in line with my plan, let's say I have a weekend and I drink more than I normally would, or I eat out more than I normally would, I'm able to almost separate myself from it, look at the data and the circumstances and be like, oh, interesting, this occurred. What led to that decision? And what do I have coming up again where I might face this, and do I want to do it differently, or how would I do it differently? And it stops becoming like, you really messed up. You made a mistake.
Right.
You're never going to reach your goals if you don't stop this behavior. What's wrong with you? Get it together. Have more discipline. That's not
just
the
yelling at
narrative
yourself
anymore.
and being so mean to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if it wasn't out loud and people couldn't see it, it was happening in here. And so not just like the physical, what you asked, like what has changed within that 10 pounds, the way I talk to myself has changed. That I have so much more, maybe more love, acceptance, and a sense of control and a plan.
Yeah.
If I do backslide and I do gain a couple of pounds back, let's say I come back from a vacation, which I recently did, went to Australia, had a wonderful time, came back a couple pounds heavier, but instead of that old narrative of being like, Brittany, you blew it. Oh, you should have stayed disciplined. Now your uniform, you're not going to be on the last belt notch anymore. It's, we know how to fix this. We've been down this road before. You had a nice time. Now let's rock and roll. Like the narrative has just changed. And it's almost like you see it through different lenses once you've had some experience under your belt of the way that we approach nutrition. So that's been a huge one.
That's really major. That's something we've touched on a little bit in our conversations that we were hoping to have, is like, what is beginner nutrition, what's intermediate, and what's advanced. And these are like advanced habits, and a way of thinking that I see in you is you're like, not like, even when you said, oh, you're not going to get in that last belt hole again, like, it's okay. You're not like attached to that last belt hole. It was all right. You were like, cool. Well, when I'm ready to go back to that, I know how to do it. That's awesome. I know what changes I need to make. And you didn't come back from your trip and like, okay, time to rule everything out. Like, I need to cut out all of XYZ. You knew what you needed to do to get back to good, to feeling
and now,
how you wanted to feel, not good.
And I still work with a coach too. So I was just going to add to that, having someone else with you on that accountability piece. So now, Jillian Ward has moved on and I'm working with Andrew Jackson right now as my coach. And even just having someone else in your corner. So when you came back from vacation and you backslid a little bit, having somebody who's supportive to be like, all right, well, why don't we make this our plan for the next 3 weeks?
Yeah.
There's no judgment in there. There's no, you don't need to bring yourself down or beat yourself up.
Yeah.
But I think it's different doing it by yourself versus having someone in your corner who's like, let's do this together. Let's get you back on track. All right. What's the week ahead look like for you? And what sort of things do you want to prioritize this coming week? What are some specific things? And I think that's
tell me more about how you do that
too.
when you're in someone's corner.
Yeah. Meaning from the coaching side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different than how we approach strength coaching, right? With strength coaching, it's very much like the coach lays out your programming and you get in the gym and you do your thing and you upload it, you report it back. And your coach is primarily like the driver of your progress and your strength journey. Whereas with nutrition, it's much more collaborative. And so it's finding strategies that the clients feel ready and willing to do and are open to. I have found that it's really important to stay positive in your feedback, because like I said before, nutrition can feel so sensitive and so personal. And so I once had someone make a comment. This is pre-block days, but I was making a comment about some of the challenges with firefighting where you go these long stretches without eating, and then you get into these feast and famine modes where you're just like, I want to eat everything in front of me. I don't want to eat it fast because I'm starving and I don't know when the tones are going to go off again. And you're desperate for food. And I had someone say to me, all the enchiladas, all of them. Yes. And I had someone say to me, hunger is not an emergency, Brittany. Whoa. And the resistance that I felt just having someone say something like, and she was right, but I immediately felt resistance and I immediately felt defensive. And I was like, remember that feeling, because you have to be careful. You have to tread carefully with people are being vulnerable with you. They're being extremely vulnerable when they're working with you as the nutrition coach. And having that piece of, positive reinforcement is a very important part of this. So So yeah, but I think having that person in your corner is also helpful in figuring out what the strategy will be, right? So it's collaborating on, we have this thing we've identified. Here are 2 or 3 ways that we could approach this. Why don't you pick the one that feels like the best fit and the one that you're, again, 90% sure you can do with consistency. And that's a big piece of that too. Just having somebody on the other side of it, right?
Yeah.
Just having somebody else be there.
You really want to know that if you're giving something up, you want that security that it's going to do what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
it's fun to celebrate. It's fun to celebrate those victories with somebody else too, right? Like, hey, I did the thing. Yeah. Who can I tell? Nobody in my family cares.
I ate all the chicken. Someone celebrate with me.
Look at this crock pot of chicken I made. Who do I send this picture to? You send it to your coach.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. It's such you've used this word, but it is a positive experience. And when like people seem ready to make nutrition changes, they're ready. It's like they're ready to be restrictive and ready to have things taken away and ready to be mad at where they are right now. But that must be so reassuring when they start to work with you, is like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah, I hope so. And we do get people who are on different levels of readiness and motivation. Like you have some people that are ready to take it to a full, right? And they want to track, or they want to do something that's very aggressive in their approach. And I respect that. We will help you do the best version of that while also watching to make sure that we're not going to reach burnout too fast, that we don't come out too fast, shooting star and then fizzle. That's kind of my job as the coach, to make sure that the strategy is appropriate for not just your goals, but also what's going on in the other areas of your life. Is it sustainable? Is it going to lead to a sense of failure if you can't do it well? And so those things are important too.
Yeah, that's nice, because that might be something that people don't realize is they've been creating a new habit, but that might also have been a trade-off that they didn't realize, and you would be able to help them kind of keep it only 10% white knuckling. I really like that.
Yeah. That's something I made up, and I have no idea if it's accurate or right, but it's been working so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a scientific measurement associated with it.
Yeah. And I mean, and to be fair, like this journey that I talked about, once I began working with Jillian, that was probably a good 2.5 years ago. And so it wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't this get rich quick thing. Like, oh, good, you cut down on your after dinner snacking and then you lost 10 pounds. This took time. But now it's my new permanent, if that makes sense. Like it's now we've cemented a ton of new habits in terms of hydration, in terms of my drinks per week, in terms of how I structure my meals, in terms of listening to my hunger signals and my fullness signals. There's a lost art. And so the habit started to just sort of snowball and to build, and it just transformed the way that I view food as a whole. It became this whole picture, and it's sort of neat that way.
I love it. What's something you wish you could, or if you could say something to you in your 20s, what do you think you would say to her?
Let's practice the fundamentals instead of seeking out something that's new, sexy, and crazy. Like give time, or give the fundamentals a chance. The things that maybe we've heard, but maybe we think are too simple to work. Like, no, that sounds too simple. And so we brush it off.
Ooh, yes.
I
like that.
Eat more veggies. Oh, I don't want to hear that. Oh, I don't want to hear that. I already know that. And sometimes we confuse I already know that with I'm already doing it. Not the same thing.
That's good.
And so I think I would have said, like, stop searching for complicated, stop searching for sexy, new, and different. And we got to trick our bodies into thinking it's this or that. Take time to hammer the fundamentals for just a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I think I blew right past that because it sounded too simple to work. Sort of like strength training, right? Sort of like linear progression. Oh, add 5 pounds. That's too simple to work. No.
I can handle more than that.
Confusion. Yeah. And it's kind of similar. And I think if I probably would have said, let's just take a little time actually doing the thing. And just let those habits start to
let that snowball.
Create to grow over time. But to be fair, probably wouldn't change any of it, because sometimes I feel like we as coaches have to suffer through the thing if we're going to guide those coming behind it. And I feel like my relationship with food was complicated for a lot of reasons, not just from my childhood, but from my career, You know, being in the fire service really complicates your relationship with food. And being on shift work really complicates your relationship with food. And so I feel like I had to conquer all these things myself. Most of the things that my clients are coming to me with, I'm like, yes, I can relate. I also have had to tackle these things. Yeah. So I think that's I think it's nice to have some of that background wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate how you're not judgmental towards yourself.
Thanks. It's been a journey, I tell you. It's been a journey, but man, it feels so freeing. And it's funny. It's just something I noticed kind of recently in myself, like, hey, the shame is gone. Like it's just different. Yeah. Thank you for appreciating it. It's very freeing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all that. I connected to like probably 100 things that you said.
Oh, good.
Your journey. And it was so helpful to hear how you can make little changes and feel good and get out of the shame spiral, because that is a big burden to have to move with, and it stops you from enjoying yourself and enjoying food. And I love your approach. Yeah. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
No. Well, maybe one thing, and that's that if you're, so as a director of nutrition, I'm happy to answer questions. If people are currently getting strength coaching through Barbell Logic and they're thinking about nutrition, but they're not quite sure what it looks like, what's the time commitment, how do we structure this? Is it the right fit for me? They're welcome to simply send me an email, bsnyder@barbell-logic.com. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm even happy to set up like a simple 10 or 15-minute call just to speak to the product. It's not a consult, but it's a nice way for people to sort of get familiar with what it is that we do. I can't remember off the top of my head. We probably have about 15 or 20 nutrition coaches at Block, and each coach has their strengths and their experience and their specialty, if you will. And so we can also sort of help find, like, if this is what you're looking for, I think that this person will be a really nice fit for you. We've got a lot of nice variety in backgrounds, strengths, and experience on the team. So that's something people can do if they're sort of on the fence or trying to decide whether it's right for them.
I would encourage that. It's useful just to get out of your own head about it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't miss this opportunity, folks. It's a good one.
Sure is.
Well, man, thank you so much for being here, Brittany, and for sharing everything and for what you bring to the team. I'm so excited for everybody who gets to work with you.
Hey, thank you. That's very kind. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for letting me share and be vulnerable about my journey to this point. Yeah.
And thanks for listening. I hope whatever you're doing today, you eat some vegetables and enjoy them and are nice to yourself.
That's right.
And if you liked us, we would really appreciate a 5-star review on whichever format you're listening. And thanks for coming by.
Cheers.